Hey everyone, Lord 2009 here from Helios Animation Studios with the beginning of a tutorial series. The goal of this series is to teach you to make an animation from start to finish in the newer versions of Blender. This tutorial should apply for any version of Blender from Blender 2.81 to 3.0 and beyond. I made this tutorial since there's no good tutorial right now for the newer versions of Blender that cover everything about making Minecraft animations, and a lot of people on our Discord server seem to be wanting it. Within this series, we're going to be covering downloading and installing Blender, importing our world, getting our textures setting up, bringing in characters and objects, and animating those characters and objects. Alright, so the first thing that you're going to be needing is a copy of Blender, of course. You can find that at blender.org. Blender is a free animation software that you can do pretty much anything with when it comes to Minecraft animation. One thing to note is that right now, currently, the Blender 2.93 is not compatible with Mcprep. So if you're watching this a week or two after the tutorial comes out, you might want to download Blender 2.92. But if you're watching it anytime after, I'd highly recommend downloading Blender 2.93, as the features in that one are a whole lot better than 2.92. If you want to know how to download previous versions of Blender, you can go over to the Download tab, Previous Versions, and over here you can find all the previous versions. There's Blender 2.7, and then you can find all the other previous versions here. Just click this, and here you go. You got a list of previous versions. Now that we have Blender downloaded, the next thing we're going to need to download is Mcprep. So we're just going to look up Mcprep, and we're going to go to this website. And over here, we see we have a nice website, and we can just download the latest version right here. After Mcprep, we're going to need to download Mindways. This is going to allow you to export your worlds from Minecraft and bring them into Blender, and then you're going to use Mcprep to prep all the textures and stuff, which you'll see in future tutorials. And as you can see, it has everything from Blender to NVIDIA to Cinema 4D to 3ds Max to Maya to Shapeways, Houdini, Sculpteo, Sketchfab, and we're of course going to download the Blender version of this software. Another thing that we're going to be needing is these sky textures. As you can see, these are the Black Plasma Studios environment textures, and these are great for getting started. They come with all these skies. You have all these different skies that are just great for getting started and very easy for beginners to use, so I'd recommend downloading these. The next thing that we're going to need is a rig, which is basically like a 3D puppet that allows us to control our character and stuff. And for that, I'm going to leave the link in the description, but this is the Black Plasma Studios Rig V3, which we're going to be using. This rig comes with all the bells and whistles of any normal rig, and it's updated quite frequently. Oh, and by the way, if you want some like free assets and cool stuff, I highly recommend joining the Black Plasma Studios Discord server. They have tons of free assets and stuff on there for you to download, and it's just great for getting started as an animator. So I'd highly recommend joining their Discord server and checking out their assets channel if you're looking for things to download. Alright, so now we're in Blender. As you can see, this is our Blender layout. You can use the middle mouse button to move around, but we're going to be changing that soon. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do once we're inside of Blender is we're going to go to Preferences, Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go to our key maps. Now, there are a few things that are just going to make your life like a whole lot easier that I highly recommend you change when using Blender, and we're just going to go through and change those real quick. The first thing is you're going to look up Duplicate, and over here we have all the duplicate stuff. This is normally Shift D in Blender, but I find Control D to be a lot easier to reach and better. Again, this is a preference thing. If you want to keep it as Shift D, feel free to do so. It's just that I personally use Control D. So you want to go through and change all of these to Control D. The next thing that we want to change is our delete key. So we're going to look up delete, and it's either the X or the delete button. And some keyboards just straight up don't have a delete button. It's this really tiny button that's not really used for much, and I find using backspace as your delete key, which is what you use to delete text, is much easier. So I'm going to change everything here that says delete to backspace, and just go through and do that. Alright, and the last thing that we're going to change is we're going to go through and we're going to go to fly. So we're just going to look up fly, and view navigation, walk and fly. Now this is Okay, so this key is originally something very weird. I don't even really know what this is. Originally I thought it was like apostrophe or something, but it turns out it's not. So we're gonna change this to Shift F, which is much easier to reach. F key is right next to the Shift key, and this is going to allow you to fly. All right, now that we're all done changing our key map stuff, we're just going to close this Blender Preferences tab. And as you can see, now we should be able to just fly using Shift F. And you can basically control your Blender like a video game, scroll wheel up and scroll wheel down to slow down and speed up, and this should get us all prepped for our episode. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go here, and this is something that I pretty much always have on auto keyframing. This makes it so when you move an object, it automatically places a keyframe, which makes your life so much easier instead of having to constantly press I to keyframe things, which is really annoying and kind of a pain. We're going to get into more into keyframes and what they do in the animation episode, but for now, just know that the auto keyframe is something that you really want to have on. Okay, so we have auto keyframe on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do keying. We're just going to change this to location, rotation. Most times you're not going to be needing scale for the BPS rig, and it adds a lot of unnecessary keyframes, which are going to clutter up your performance, make everything run a little bit slower, and it's going to be harder to find specific keyframes when you need to. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to playback, and we're just going to change the sync, which is right now play every frame, to sync to audio, and we're just going to change this to scrubbing, so that when you scrub you can hear the audio. And if you want to mute the audio anytime, you can press this button. We're going to go limit playback to frame range. And another thing that I forgot to mention that I just did subconsciously is to change the start key from 1 to 0. I don't know why it's not automatically at 0. Alright, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up some collections. So up here in this little tab, you're going to see collections. And what collections are, is they're basically these little folders. Like you have folders on your desk that you put pieces of paper in and stuff. Collections are kind of like that. It helps keep your viewport performance really clean. If I have a bunch of cubes in here, I would have to render all of these cubes, which would make my viewport not play at 60 frames per second, and I couldn't see the actual animation that I was doing. It would just be very slow and cluttered. So what you want to do is you want to split everything up into different collections. So for example, first I could have this collection for all my rigs, this collection for the map, and let's say I don't need the map right now and I'm running at 1 frame per second. I could just hide the map like this. I could turn it back on when I need to render, or I could just hide it in the viewport, which is going up here to this little thing up here, pressing this. You can only hide it in the viewport, so it'll still show up when you render. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to this tab, and we're going to change our render engine from Eevee to Cycles. This is optional. I might make a separate branch of tutorials for using Eevee, but right now we're using Cycles. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to change CPU to GPU, and we're not going to be touching any of this stuff till later. Alright, and so your Blender should be completely set up with everything that you need in the scene, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye!